Hello students, welcome to the channel. In today's video, we'll do a reading walkthrough of the literature passage from the 2019 PSAT. We'll do this live together and then we'll grade the answers. So let's begin. This passage is adapted from Ruth Ozeki, A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. This passage is set in British Columbia. Ruth has discovered a bag containing a book on a beach. So the blurb of a literature passage would give you the context of what we are going to read. Since this is a story and this is different from the other 4 passages on the SAT, it tells you what is going to happen very broadly. It wouldn't go into the details, but it would tell you the setting and what has happened as the passage is set, as we get into the passage, what it is that we need to know. So it's about this person, Ruth, who has discovered a bag that contains a book. In search of lost time, Ruth said, translating the tarnished gilt title embossed on the book's red cloth spine. I've never read it. I haven't either, said Oliver. I don't think I'll be trying it in French, though. She said, agreeing, but then she opened the cover anyway, curious to see if she could understand just the first few lines. She was expecting to see an age-stained folio printed in an antique font, so she was entirely unprepared for the adolescent purple handwriting that sprawled across the page. It felt like a desecration, and it shocked her so much she almost dropped the book. So the first few paragraphs give you the setting, right? They describe this book that Ruth has discovered on the beach, and she's with someone called Oliver. And the book is in French. We know that because she translates the title of the book into English when she says it's In Search of Lost Time. And In Search of Lost Time is actually a very famous French novel by Proust, who was a French writer. So this is the book that Ruth has discovered, and she has never read it, neither has Oliver, but he also says that he doesn't plan to read it in French. And then because Ruth is conversant somewhat with French, she decides to kind of open it and see what's written inside. And since the book has this kind of really, this quality of coming from a certain age, right? Because it was a gilt title and there was a red spine. So it seemed to belong to a certain age. So when she opens it, she's kind of surprised that there were these words written in adolescent writing. She almost expected this book to be untouched, right? Because it gave that impression. And it felt like a desecration. A desecration is like a damaging. She felt the book had been damaged because of that writing. And she was so surprised that she dropped the book. Print is predictable and impersonal, conveying information in a mechanical transaction with the reader's eye. Handwriting, by contrast, resists the eye, reveals its meaning slowly, and is as intimate as skin. So these 2 little paragraphs kind of explain why Ruth was so shocked when she saw the handwriting on the first page of the book. Because when you just look at print, it seems distant. It seems, not intimate because it's just words typed. But handwriting is more personal. It has actually been written by someone right there before your eyes. So it's intimate. Ruth stared at the page. The purple words were mostly in English, with some Japanese characters scattered here and there. But her eye wasn't really taking in their meaning as much as a felt sense, murky and emotional, of the writer's presence. The fingers that had gripped the purple gel ink pen must have belonged to a girl, a teenager. Her handwriting, these loopy purple marks, impressed onto the page, retained her moods and anxieties, and the moment Ruth laid eyes on the page, she knew without a doubt that the girl's fingertips were moist and soft and that she had bitten her nails down to the quick. So this is an interesting paragraph because the page on which this person, this adolescent, has left some words, some words in purple ink. Just going through that page gives Ruth a lot of information about the person, the girl, the teenage girl who has written those words. This is surprising because when you imagine Ruth reading that page, you imagine her trying to understand the meaning of the words which are written there, but rather she's more interested in the person who has written them, right? So this line number 21, which says her eye wasn't really taking in the meaning of the words as much as a felt sense of the writer's presence, right? So Ruth was kind of more interested in, or rather, she was getting this sense of who this person who had written those words were, much more than what the words themselves meant, right? And in fact, she imagined this adolescent, moody girl, anxious girl, with moist fingertips and nails chewed uh, to the very end, right? So she imagined a person like that having written those words. Ruth looked more closely at the letters. They were round and a little bit sloppy, as she now imagined the girl must be too. But they stood more or less upright and marched gamely across the page at a good clip, not in a hurry, but not dawdling either. Sometimes at the end of a line, they crowded each other a little, like people jostling to get onto an elevator or into a subway car, just as the doors were closing. Ruth's curiosity was piqued. It was clearly a diary of some kind. She examined the cover again. Should she read it? Deliberately now, she turned to the first page, feeling vaguely prurient, like an eavesdropper. Novelists spend a lot of time poking their noses into other people's business. Ruth was not unfamiliar with this feeling. Okay, so again, a lot to unpack in this paragraph, right? So here, the first few lines kind of describe what the handwriting was telling Ruth, right? We already know that she's really interested in what's on the page because it kind of gives her an insight into the person who has written those words. So what is the writing telling her? She felt that the writing was sloppy, right? Sloppy is not very smartly turned out, right? Not given to presenting a good impression, right? So she felt that the writing was sloppy and the girl who had written those must be sloppy too. Um, she, but she also noticed that the words were not, they were not, like the words were, the writing was sloppy, but the words were upright, right? They kind of meant to say something, right? It wasn't that this person had just dawdled. To dawdle is to just kind of write something without really intending to convey anything, just to kind of make some marks on a piece of paper. But here, no, there was some sense that was implied in those words. So this could be a diary of some kind. That's what Ruth came to believe. And she felt prurient. Prurient is kind of when when you kind of poke your nose into other people's business. That's so she felt that she was eavesdropping into this girl's private thoughts, and but she continued to do it because she realized that, or rather, it came to her mind that novelists do it all the time. That's what books, fiction is all about. So she was not unfamiliar with this feeling, which is perhaps to suggest that she was an aspiring novelist herself. We'll see. Hi, she read. My name is Now, and I'm a time being. Do you know what a time being is? Flotsam, Oliver said. He was examining the barnacles that had grown onto the surface of the outer plastic bag. I can't believe it. Ruth glanced up from the page. Of course, it's Flotsam or Jetsam. The book felt warm in her hands and she wanted to continue reading, but heard herself asking instead, what's the difference anyway? So this is kind of an interruption in the passage, right? Because so far you've had Ruth kind of being deeply absorbed in the book and, thinking of what the handwriting could be telling her, all of that. And now, as she's reading the first line of this person who's now, and she calls herself a time being, she's suddenly interrupted by Oliver, who says flotsam. So flotsam is jetsam is kind of, it refers to the things that float on oceans, right? The waste product that floats on oceans. And Ruth kind of says, like she's not sure of which one of the two it is, what the difference between flotsam and jetsam. So she asks Oliver, what's the difference? Flotsam is accidental, stuff found floating at sea. Jetsam's been jettisoned. It's a matter of intent. So you are right. Maybe this is jetsam. He laid the bag down onto the table. I think it's starting. So he said that, so flotsam is accidental, right? It's just stuff that, for some reason has ended up in the sea. But this could be jetsam. This, as in the bag in which the book is found, this could be jetsam. There could be an intentionality to the writers deciding to put it there, right? So he thinks that, this could be intentional, the fact that the bag with the book was placed there. What's starting? So he finishes his quotation by saying it's starting, and Ruth asks him what's starting. Drifters, he said, escaping the orbit of the Pacific Gyre. His eyes were sparkling and she could tell he was excited. She rested the book in her lap. What's a gyre? So there is also this other thing happening in the passage, right? There is this one part where Ruth is kind of completely absorbed in this book, this accidental discovery that she's found. And this other part where she's having this conversation with Oliver, and Oliver keeps throwing these really technical terms at her. And she keeps asking him the meaning of those. So Oliver is like having this entire other thing going on. He's interested in the sea, he's interested in currents, he's interested in gyres. And the fact that Ruth has to ask him all of these is kind of to show that the characters, even though they are together, they are interested in very different things. Like Ruth is kind of interested in more in the subjective reality of the writer whose book she has discovered, while Oliver is interested in more workday things like, oceans and gyres and flotsam, so stuff like that. Okay. There are 11 great planetary gyres. I think it's gyre. I'm not sure if the pronunciation is gyre or Gaia, but I think it's gyre. He said, 2 of them flow directly towards us from Japan and diverge just off the British Columbia coastline. The smaller one, the Aleut Gyre, goes north towards the Aleutian Islands. The larger one goes south. It's sometimes called the Turtle Gyre because the sea turtles ride it when they migrate from Japan to Baja. So he's kind of describing these gyres, these kind of, ocean currents that bring stuff and other move around things between the oceans and within the ocean. So he says that, there are all these gyres, and he also speaks about a gyre that could bring stuff from Japan to British Columbia. And that is perhaps what brought this back here, because Ruth did see some Japanese writing inside. He held up his hands to describe a big circle. Imagine the Pacific, Oliver said. The Turtle Gyre goes clockwise and the Aleut Gyre goes counterclockwise. His hands moved in the great arcs and spirals of the ocean floor. So I think there is this quite a definite shift in the focus of the passage where, the first part is more concerned with the book and the second part is more concerned with this kind of relationship between Ruth and Oliver, right? Okay, let's look at the questions. Which choice best supports the conclusion that Ruth first believes the diary is very old? Okay, so I'm just going to write down the line numbers, 8 to 11, 14 to 16, 39 to 40, and 48 to 50. So I'm sure it's between A and B because that was something that was brought up in the first paragraph. So 8 to 11 says she was expecting to see an age-stained folio printed in an antique font. So she was entirely unprepared for the adolescent purple handwriting. So it's very clearly A because her expectation was that this book would be old and aged, right? So she was surprised when she saw this purple handwriting. So I already like A. And then 14 to 16 is kind of describing the difference between print and handwriting. So obviously that's not relevant. And the last two are way later in the passage. So 1 second, I just need to remove this and write A. Okay. A. Let's go to the second one. As used in line 14, conveying most nearly means. So what is line 14? Print is predictable and impersonal, conveying information in a mechanical transaction. So to convey information, right? Let's look at the options: bearing, communicating, projecting, and conducting. So I like communicating, right? Print is impersonal. It communicates or conveys information from a distance. Bearing is to bear information is to have information, right? And that's not what the sentence is saying. It's trying to say that print conveys information in an impersonal manner. So A is out. Projecting, to project is to kind of, it has a number of meanings, but one of the meanings of project is to kind of, like don't project your emotions on me, which is to say that I don't believe or I don't think the way you do. So that's kind of not the context of what we are looking at, is not supported here. And you can't conduct information, right? Information does not go with conduct. So B is a good answer. Okay, the narrator distinguishes between print and handwriting primarily to illustrate how writers reveal specific mannerisms through text, how readers interact with different types of text, why readers find it difficult to decipher handwritten text, why readers classify print text as more durable than handwritten text. So I think it's B, right? Because her own surprise, Ruth's own surprise at the purple handwriting was because she had expected the book to have print. She had expected the book to be old and impersonal. But the moment she saw the handwriting, she could feel the presence of the writer, right? So the way she reacted to the text, she interacted with the text, had to do with the handwriting that she saw in it, right? So it was how readers interact with different types of text. It's the interaction between the reader and the text. So that's option B. Do we want to look at the other options? It's not about mannerisms, right? That's not what we are talking about. It's not what the writer wishes to reveal. It's not about deciphering. It's not about trying to figure out what the text is saying and the reader finding it difficult. And it's not about durability, right? Here we are interested in an emotional response to the text, not in how long the text can last. Okay, as used in line 26, impressed most nearly means. So her handwriting, these loopy purple marks impressed onto the page, right? So they kind of put this force onto the page, right? They could be felt applying their presence, their force on the page. So that's the context. Designed, emphasized, forced, and inscribed. So why don't we write all these 4 words here? And I can just do a screenshot and then we can discuss each of them. Okay, so yeah, I'm just going to make this a little bigger. Yeah, that's fine. So can I say her handwriting, these loopy marks designed onto the page? No, that doesn't make sense because I'm trying to say that they applied a sort of force. They were there, right? So they were not designed onto the page. So that's not, they emphasized onto the page. I don't think emphasize can be used in this sense. Emphasize is used when you're saying that a person is kind of stressing on a point, right? So it's, I don't think words can emphasize onto the page. It's a human being that can emphasize a point. Her handwriting, these loopy marks forced onto the page, right? So the way I was looking at impressed onto the page, it was kind of apply of force, right? I'm not too comfortable with forced onto the page because that makes it sound something different. That makes it sound that it was a forced effort. But that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that there was a sense of There was a sense of noting their presence, right? So even though the word force is relevant to the context, I don't know if forced onto the page is the best answer. And inscribed. Inscription is definitely not right, because to inscribe is to kind of leave a mark, right? So, and that's like a deeper sort of a three-dimensional mark, right? So it doesn't make sense to say inscribed either. So that leaves us with no option as perfect. So then what is the best answer? Let's read a little more. The fingers that had gripped the purple gel ink pen must have belonged to a girl, a teenager. The handwriting impressed onto the page. So I mean, I don't like forced, but I do think that it's the best answer in context, because we are trying to say that there was a sense of this, it was very visible. It marked its presence there. Yeah. So I'm going with C for this. Okay. The phrase in parentheses in lines 32 to 33 primarily serves to suggest Ruth is, and okay, this is a standalone question. So 32 to 33, what is the phrase in parentheses there? Ruth looked more closely at the letters. They were round and a little bit sloppy, as she now imagined the girl must be too. So Ruth kind of connects the handwriting to what the girl could be like, right? She kind of extrapolates from that. So that Ruth is deciding whether to read Now's diary, adapting to Now's shifting moods, criticizing Now's messy handwriting, forming an idea of Now's characteristics. So I like D, because she's kind of figuring out what Now could be like from the handwriting. So she's forming an idea of her characteristics, one of which she thinks is being sloppy. So I like D. It's not related to whether to read Now's diary, and she's not adapting to her shifting moods. It's not about Ruth adapting to anything. It's about what she thinks Now is like, right? And this is, I don't think it's a point of criticism. It's more to note what is happening inside the book, right? So C is out as well. Okay, number 6, which choice best describes how Ruth approaches the idea of reading the diary? So this comes from that part where she says that, she's kind of thinking if she should read the diary, and then she decides to go ahead with it because she thinks that that novelists do this all the time. They get into other people's heads, they get into other people's lives, so that's okay. She feels entitled to study Now's writing, but is worried about translating it. She fails to contemplate whether Now's diary should be viewed only by its owner. Her hesitation to read the diary is overcome by a desire to pry into Now's affairs. Her consideration for Now's privacy is based on her own experience as a novelist. Um, hmm. Okay, so this is a good question. So let me just try and cancel some options first. So there is option A is definitely out, right? She's not thinking about translating anything. So A is, and I think entitled is somewhat extreme word. I don't think Ruth feels entitled to study. She doesn't fail to contemplate that question. That question does come to her. It does appear, it does appear in her mind that she should probably not be doing this. So she does contemplate the idea of not reading. I don't think I don't know if it is prying into her affairs. It's not that she knows now and it's not about prying into her affairs. It's more to do with, we know that, she's a novelist. We know that she's aspiring to be a novelist, at least. We know that because it says there, right? Let's go back and read this. This is where it says it. Novelists spend a lot of time poking their noses into other people's business. Ruth was not unfamiliar with this feeling. So she kind of is applying that yardstick of what a novelist does, right? So it's not about prying into her affairs. I'm not sure that was the reason that she wanted to read. her consideration for Now's privacy is based on her own experience as a novelist. Um, yeah, but at the same time, I'm not very happy with D either, because if she was considering Now's privacy, she wouldn't even have opened the first page of the diary, which introduced Now, which said that, "Hi, I'm Now and I'm a time being." So, um, yeah, so I see, the thing is, I think D could have been written better. D could have been written as her consideration for Now's privacy is overcome by her experience as a novelist. Uh, but that is not what D is saying, because she is not considerate of Now's privacy based on her own experience as a novelist. Her consideration of Now's privacy is overcome because when she talks about a novelist, she talks about prying into other people's lives. So, yeah, so I would go with C for this. I think C is better than D. I was not very happy with C initially because I thought this prying business was extreme, but D is outright wrong. D talks about, um, you know, I don't know. I mean, should we read that again? Let's see. What does it say? Because yeah, I don't like C either. Should she read it deliberately? Now she turned to the first page. Novelists spend a lot of time poking their nose. Ruth was not unfamiliar with this feeling. So I don't think that you can say that her consideration is based on her. Yeah, so I would go with C. Yeah, I'm a little unsure of this, but I think I would go with C. Okay, so let's see. Yeah. It can reasonably be inferred that Now would react to her diary being read with embarrassment because she reflects on personal matters, approval because she addresses an imagined reader in her writing, alarm because she describes her moods and anxieties, and surprise because she's unaware that readers are inquisitive. So I think it's B, right? Because the very first line that Ruth reads is, "Hi, I'm Now and I'm a time being. Do you know what a time being is?" Which is to say that she's kind of addressing an imagined reader, right? So I like B and I like the lines. Do you know what a time being? I like those lines, 46 to 47 as evidence, right? Right. So I'll go with B and I'll go with D for this question 8, because yeah, because that's the whole point of saying, do you know what time being is? Right. And A, C, and D, there is no evidence because we don't really hear from Now at all, except in those two lines. Okay, and the last question in the passage, Oliver indicates the two Pacific gyres rotate in opposite directions, are named for their points of origin, are used by turtles to migrate to Baja and near the British Columbia coastline. So I think it's A, right? He says it here very clearly that the turtle gyre goes clockwise and the alute gyre goes counterclockwise, lines 74 to 76. So it's very clearly A. Okay, so that was an interesting passage. I was expecting a few questions about kind of this interruption that happened in Ruth's absorption of the book and this conversation with Oliver, but great. So let's grade this. This was the October 16, 2019 test. So I'm going to look at its answer key. Okay, so I think this was answer key 4. That was the one that we had. So A, B, B, C, A, B, B, C, D, D, B, D, A, D, C, B, D, A. Okay, so question 6, when that debate between C and D, actually the right answer is D. So let's just mark that. This is wrong and the right answer is D. So and let's try and understand why D, right? And this is an important learning because very often, the answer that uses extreme words must not be accepted, right? And when I was discussing this question, I mentioned that prying into Now's affairs looks extreme, right? Now, D, I think the thing is that it's a more broad answer, and we know that her, she was worried about Now's privacy. She was considering it because of her own experience as a novelist. And I think even though it finally led her to read what the diary said, and novelists do, kind of get into other people's lives and heads, I think D is kind of conveying that relationship, not necessarily how that relationship turned out, but the fact that there was a relationship between her decision to read, her consideration, and her experience as a novelist. I think I was thrown off a little bit by the word consideration, because I thought that if she was considering Now's privacy, then she was being considerate. But those are not the same things, right? She actually decided to go ahead and read. So an important learning for why D is better is that C is just extreme, and extreme options are not good. Okay, so hope this exercise was useful. If it was, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comment section what other reading walkthroughs you'd like me to upload, and I'll try and upload some. I'll see you guys in a new video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.